Hi, folks. Welcome to It Matters Radio. I'm Ken Weene. With me today is my lovely co-host, Monica Brinkman.
Hello, all. Hi, Ken.
Hi. And our guest today is somebody I have been a fan of for some time. Every day in my email, I get something called the Schwartz Report. And if you're not getting the Schwartz Report, I hope by the end of this interview, you're going to go to schwarzreport.net and sign up, because our guest, Stephan Schwartz, among his many great contributions to the world, is he does this report that brings attention to important news that is going to help change the world. And that is really what he is about. Now, I looked at his CV, and I could spend the next half hour or so reading his CV. Okay, I mean, it's that long, folks, and you can find it on his website, and we'll tell you how to get to that in a bit. But the one thing, besides the report, that I thought today I would mention is a book he wrote. It was published in 2016, and it's called The 8 Laws of Change.
The 8 Laws of Change, correct, Ken?
Change, yeah. Okay. It's about how to change yourself and your society and your world. And he looks at some of the great change agents of history. And actually, I haven't actually read the book. I've read about the book. It's on my read list, which, as you know, Monica, is. So we're going to, I hope that Stephan will come back and talk more about that.
You know, I just want to interject here for a moment. I think Stephan is just fascinating. Please be sure and check out the websites that we have underneath the podcast here. And there's so much information. I know, Ken, there are some things. I know we're focusing on one topic today, but I hope Stephan will come back and speak about some of the other things he's written about also. It's just so intriguing.
And we haven't even given you a chance to open your mouth, Stephan.
I know.
So now
Praise. What can I say?
Now that we have been most fulsome in our praise, why don't you tell us how you happened to create the Schwartz Report?
In 1991, 92, I was sending out things which I thought deserved attention, but that were not getting enough attention and in the media, because the corporate media is structured to basically have an A block, a B block, a C block, and then some other short little things. In an hour format. Actually, it's about 52 minutes. And it's just a formula that American media is structured in, and as a result, you don't get much attention to things which are very important. And so for many years, going back to the 70s, back in the early 1970s, I was the special assistant to the Chief of Naval Operation, and also part of the MIT Secretary of Defense discussion group on innovation, technology, and the future. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about trends that were shaping the future, and I got to know a number of people who were futurists and their vision of the future. And in 1978, I left government in 76 and did so. As I did so, I was involved with the geopolitical community, and I was convinced we were going to have a nuclear war, because most of the people who were in the geopolitical world, that's what they thought. We all thought. I mean, it just seemed like inevitable that somebody'd make a mistake and we'd end up in a nuclear war. And in fact, although very few people know it, were it not for the bravery of one Soviet colonel who just wouldn't push the button, we would have had the Third World War.
And isn't
But
that
he wouldn't
scary?
push the button, and by the time they figured out what was really going on, they recognized that the radars which showed American incoming missiles were in fact not reporting properly. Anyway, so I started sending out emails to people. This is the early days of email. And it got up to about 10,000 people I was sending them out to, and it just seemed like very bad etiquette to be taking up that amount of bandwidth, sending all these emails out. So I thought, well, I'll start a report. And so I did, the Schwartz Report. I've been doing it ever since. I give it away, you know, I don't charge anything. It has no advertising. And it's just been going on. I don't advertise about it. I don't know how people find out about it, but it's got about 45,000 readers, which isn't huge, but is also not insignificant. And I track things which are changing the future, either for good or ill, because my conviction is that the function of the state is to foster well-being.
The commonweal.
Yes, I mean, that's what the founders had in mind: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yes.
And in another one of my lives, I'm a historian of the early American Republic and a specialist in Benjamin Franklin and George Mason. So I have believed for many years that the function of the state is to foster well-being, and I've done a great deal of research on this. And when you do the research, because I'm completely a data person, I'm not interested in partisan politics except in an anthropological sense. I'm not interested in political theories. I'm not interested in philosophies. I don't care about any of that. What I care about is objectively measurable social outcome data. So when I say to you that this is going to happen, it's not based on my wish or my philosophy or my political party or any of that kind of stuff. It's based on facts. I just deal with facts. And when you look at that, you discover that those countries and those social policies, anywhere in the world, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter about race, doesn't matter about religion, doesn't matter about where you are geographically in the country. Social policies which foster well-being are always easier to implement, more productive, more efficient, more easier to live under, and much, much cheaper.
And that's the rub often, because they are cheaper. That means the people who want to make the money on it don't necessarily support them.
That is correct. If you run a system on neoliberal economics and profit is the only social priority, you don't get good outcomes. And my concern in the United States is that we have gone from being a country that was founded on the idea of fostering well-being, but has become distorted to a country that has the worst wealth inequality, any country in the developed world, that has the largest gulag, about 2.3 million people that are in prison or jail, with a wildly disproportionate racial bias. We have the police brutality that is now starting. We've militarized the police. And we don't have a healthcare system in the United States. There is no healthcare in the United States.
I so agree with you on that.
There is the illness profit system.
Yes.
And as we have stressed the illness profit system as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, you can see its complete inadequacies. It has nothing to do with the doctors and nurses. It's about the fact that corporations own these things, and they run these hospitals basically to make a profit.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why rural America, for instance, hospitals are closing like bees, leaving the hive, because they're not profitable enough. And therefore, there are states in the United States now which basically have third world economy healthcare. I mean, if you were a woman who was pregnant, for instance, and your water broke at 2 o'clock in the morning, as it does, as I know for a fact, I've watched my wife, you have to you have to go to a hospital. Well, there are parts of the United States where you're probably going to deliver your child in a truck, because it's going to be 100 miles before you get to the hospital.
Right.
Why? Because the hospitals were closed, because they weren't profitable enough.
While we're making this list of things that are going wrong, I want to make sure we include the degradation of the environment.
Oh, Lord, yes.
We have to include that.
I mean,
Yeah, that's more important than anything.
yeah, if you just look at what Trump has done just in the last 6 months, I mean, this latest one, he has reversed all of the Obama era EPA regulations in Alaska involving hunting, and so it's now legal again to take donuts and soak them in bacon grease and lure bears and wolves out of their lairs and then kill the babies in the lair. I mean, it's so disgustingly horrible.
Yes.
I mean, he's such a disgustingly horrible man. But it's and the big news, again, you look at the trends, is that based on every factual evidence that we have access to, it's very clear that we're going to have in the world hundreds of millions of climate migrants. In the United States, we're going to have 3 big migrations away from the coasts because of sea rise and largely the disappearance of most of Florida, for instance, but effects in South Carolina, in Virginia, in Norfolk, Virginia, Portsmouth, Virginia Beach, Charleston, South Carolina, on the West Coast, Los Angeles, all those little cities between Los Angeles and San Diego. 52% of the American population live within 200 miles of a sea coast in what's called coastal county. And as the sea rises, those people are going to have to go somewhere. And so they're going to move. And I was speaking at a medical conference, and I said to the doctors at this medical conference that this was going to happen. And I said, is your hospital, is your clinic prepared for 1,000% increase in patients in crisis? These migrants that are going to be coming. So it's not just the cities that they're leaving that are going to be affected, it's where they're going. So first crisis, sea rise and the migration away from the coast. Second crisis, out of the Southwest because of rising temperatures and lack of water. Water is destiny. Third crisis, out of the central states as a result of dramatic, catastrophic weather events. Again, I was speaking at a conference out in Oklahoma, and I went to dinner, and I was seated next to a city councilman, and he didn't believe in climate change. He was a Trumper, and I said to him, well, what does concern you? And he said, well, what concerns me is how many times do you rebuild a town? I said, what? He said, well, we've had towns that have been destroyed by tornadoes, not just once, but a couple of times. So the question we're asking is how many times do you rebuild one of these towns? So 3 migrations, away from the coast, out of the Southwest, and out of the central states.
But I have to interrupt here and point out that I thought that Mr. Trump had figured out the solution to that. He's going to buy Greenland and move all the people there.
Oh, I know.
Stephan has not interacted with me before, folks, so he's not prepared for my bizarre.
Well, no, what you're saying is absolutely correct, but it's crazy. And we're not preparing. We're not getting prepared. What we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic is we have managed this about as badly as possible. In fact, we have the worst outcomes of any country in the world.
Yep.
Well, you have the media telling us that this is not a problem, that it's all been taken care of and it's gone away.
Yeah, no, yeah, of course.
We're going to
None of
take
it's been
Anthony
taken care of, and none of it has gone away. We now have over 2 million people. They're talking about we're going to have 200,000 deaths by August. We're going to see, you know, I mean, Trump's no fool. I mean, in order to go to his convention, you got to sign a thing saying, "Oh, I don't have any responsibility."
Yeah.
I thought that was
Stephan,
wonderful.
that's what it just, he's such a hypocrite about things. I mean, why would he have anybody sign something if, you know, the virus wasn't here?
Well, hey, look, given his history in the courts, there's no point in not signing it or signing it, because when you go to sue him, you're not going to get anything in you.
No, you'll be in the courts your whole lifetime.
Yeah. So I am very concerned because the United States has become a country in which profit is the only social priority.
Yes.
And you can see it in the racial disparities. You can see it in the wealth inequality. You know, you got 4 people that have as much wealth as the 48% of the country. I mean, it's nuts. It's a kind of neo-feudalism. You know, I think it's so vast. The inequality is so vast that most Americans can't even imagine it. I mean, they just can't imagine what would life be like if I had a private plane. I mean, I was in New York a few years ago and with a guy that has a great deal of money, and he said to me, "Hey, let's fly to Paris. We'll get there in time for dinner, and there's a show there that I really would like to see, and then we could spend a couple of days and then we'll fly back." And then, you know, hey, he was perfectly happy to do that.
In his private jet.
People can't even imagine what that would be like. I mean, 40% of the country can't write a $400 check. Mm-hmm. So the wealth inequality, the racism, all of this stuff. You know, my family's been here since 1609. I'm a vet. My father's a vet, or was a vet. All his uncles were vets. My mother's family were all vets, going all the way back to George Washington. And I have a very, like most people, I have a very strong emotional attachment. And I'm just appalled at the dismantlement of American democracy and the fundamental principles upon which the country was founded. I just think it's intolerable.
It's enough to make you cry. I mean,
I want to just point out one thing that, Stephan, that you said earlier. Your concern about this. I mean, we've talked about Mr. Trump and his failings, but your concern goes back before that. You've been sharing these concerns about what not covered in the news. And by the way, it isn't, for those of you who are wondering what is in this newsletter, which I get every day, it's links. It's short summaries of articles, then links that you can follow to read the entire article. And I think in all of that, I mean, I don't click on every link, I have to be honest.
Oh, no, nobody does.
Yeah.
But in all this time that I have been reading the Schwarz Report, and I have only actually followed one that got me to something that you personally had written. Mm-hmm. That was the one that really, I mean, it blew me out of the water. It was a piece about racism and your experiences. And that was when I contacted you and asked you to join us on It Matters Radio. But, you know, so folks, these are data-driven. As Stephan had said earlier, these are data-driven, good depth news reporting.
And you know, Ken, that's something that people are always asking. Well, where do you get your information? Where's the proof to back it up? And this is what I adore about what Stephan has set up, because he's not just talking, folks. He's backing it up with truth and reality.
Yeah, I actually start in the primary academic literature, but most of it is too technical for most people and too sort of granular. So then I go and find a popular report from a reliable source that recounts what the primary research status. It's all about data. Mm-hmm. And as you know, if you read it regularly, every once in a while, maybe once or twice a year, somebody sends me something that corrects it and I publish corrections. To me, what matters is that you get absolutely reliable data. And I write a commentary, as you know, and then I send you to a little bit of the article, and then I send you to whatever the article is from its source. You can also go to academia.edu or researchgate.com and get all of my papers. I've got hundreds of papers I've written in all kinds of magazines and journals and whatever, and I make it all freely available. It doesn't cost anything to get any of it, and I make the Schwartz Report available, and people who are moved to can contribute. But I don't charge anything, and I don't put ads up, and I'm not. It's what I care about, as I said, is fostering well-being, and so I am trying to help people who want to be agents of change to foster well-being, to give them the information, the tools that they need to do that. It's that simple.
Stephan, how do we fight, though, what has turning out for many of Trump's followers that they have become a cult of sorts?
Yes, they are a cult.
And how do you fight that? Because anything anyone says, it's just dismissed.
I just have to throw in my line here. Why, gosh, you give them all a free packet of Kool-Aid.
Well,
these are
we're not going to change the thinking of the Trumpers. There's several things you've got to always bear in mind. The average IQ in the United States is 98.
Really?
40% are between 98 and 85. And then between 85 and 78, which is retarded.
Oh, my word.
About 27% of the country have overactive right amygdalas. That's a little almond-shaped gland that's in your brain that is involved with fight or flight. And research shows that it correlates very strongly with extreme religiosity and conservative politics.
I see. Very
So
interesting.
you have a percentage of the population who literally are hardwired, they're not going to change. So but democracy is not so much about changing as it is about getting the majority to speak out.
Yes.
And so the question is not how do we change the Trumpers? You're not going to change them. The answer is you overwhelm a minority of prejudice with a majority that fosters well-being. And so this election, which is probably the most important election in the history of the country, is going to get down to how many people vote.
Well, I agree with what you're saying, but I'd add one more thing, which is that a lot of the people on the extreme right, I mean, some of it has to do with kind of religious stuff that we've talked about on other shows, but a lot of it is about a sense of fear and concern, and people are afraid. They're afraid they're going to lose what they have. They're afraid of what's going to happen. And what we have to do, I think, to help people change is to make them see that the alternative is not something fearful, but rather something hopeful.
Yes.
And when you say to people, you know, if we change the police methods, all of us are going to live in a more peaceful world.
Of course.
If the ERPs out of Dodge, you know, one of the things that amazes me is people don't realize once they got the ERPs out of Dodge, you know, down by the OK Corral down here, what the name of the town is. It wasn't Dodge really, but once they got the Europeans out, the town was more peaceful.
Yes.
Yeah. That kind of policing has never helped. Okay?
Well, I mean, let me give you, again, I'm a fact person. About 1,000 people a year get killed by the police in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Over with a very strong skew, racial skew to black and brown people.
Yes, considerably more than you'd expect.
That is more people killed by the police than all of the developed European and Nordic nations combined.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In contrast to the police shootings in the United States, the police in Norway only pulled out a gun 42 times in the year, and they only fired twice.
Yep.
And they didn't kill anybody.
Yep.
It seems that we're a lot of the police, they're either living in fear, so they're quick to react, or they're not getting proper training on how to handle
the
these
militarization of the police,
Yeah.
selling them surplus military equipment, training them. This whole approach to the military, you know, in Norway, in Ireland, in England, in Iceland, and there's more. I just can't think of them right off the top. The police don't normally carry guns.
And you have to get special permission to pull a weapon.
Yes, and if you want to get a gun, they have them in the trunk of their car in a special container, and they have to call back to get permission to open the container. So how is it that these countries all over Europe and the Nordic countries are able to control the populations or keep them at peace or keep them low crime, whatever, however you want to frame that, and they don't have to pull out guns and they don't shoot people?
Well, you know, let's go to a switch topics here for a second, because I think it's the same kind of thinking. Let's look at another topic that the right wing are really very upset about, which is abortions. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, I don't know. I have, to the best of my knowledge, I've never met anybody who is pro-abortion. I've met people who say are pro a woman's right to choose. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
But I've never run into somebody who goes around going up to pregnant women and say, you should have an abortion.
No one ever does that.
But
well, maybe if you're the father, but
if you want to cut down on abortions, it's very clear. The data has been very clear. What won't cut down on abortions? Good sex education.
Yes.
Pre and peri.
Yeah.
Availability of condoms, increasing self-esteem among women. There are a lot, you know, you go with those things and the abortion rates go. The other thing we know is you outlaw abortions, you try and stigmatize them, you try and make people travel longer distances to get them, and guess what? The rates go up.
Yes.
Yeah.
And worse is the rates of unsuccessful abortions, those which end in the death of the mother or her infertility for life.
And those are only the ones reported. Look how many back alley doctors who are doing these same things. You know?
When I was a boy, a teenager, into my early 20s, 2 women that I knew, I was not involved, but that I knew, died from back alley abortions.
Oh my word. How sad.
And my view on this is, first of all, if a woman doesn't control her own body, she doesn't control anything.
Right. Amen.
And second of all, just exactly as you say, if you want to reduce abortions, you improve sex education, the availability of contraceptives, and you increase a woman's sense of her own self-worth, so she doesn't get intimidated into having sex with some boy or man who's sort of bamboozled her. Yes. And in fact, data is absolutely clear about this. The other thing about the anti-abortion, there's something else about this that really, as long as you're on this topic, if the people that were anti-abortionists, or anti-choice is really the way I think of it,
I agree.
were pro-children as they claim, then they would become leaders of the prenatal and postnatal child care, child education, child nutrition.
They'd want these kids.
The anti-choice community doesn't do any of that.
No.
And the third thing, if you believe, I mean, the research is very clear on this, about what I would call the continuity of consciousness. That is, consciousness existed before incarnation, and it will continue after corporeal death. Then abortion is basically depriving somebody of their judgment car. It's not, it is not, if you're a religious person and you believe in the eternal nature of the soul, then abortion is not the destruction of the soul, it's the destruction of a particular avatar. I'm not saying that that's good, but what I am saying is that for those three reasons, you got to have a woman. If you don't control your own body, you know, if they said all men who have a genetic predisposition to heart disease have to be sterilized so that they don't. We want to get this heart disease trend out of the country. So any man who has a genetic predisposition to heart disease has to be sterilized so that he won't pass it on.
Yeah.
Think about the response that would produce.
I know.
So if a woman doesn't control her body, then what you are doing is saying she is a second-class person.
I think that's what they want again now.
Yeah,
Well, I think it is too.
I think that one
This
of
is all
the
Abrahamic thinking. This is all about male domination. And most of these men are guys who are concerned about their manhood.
Yeah.
I mean, that is the big
No,
thing
it's-
about
are we back on Donald Trump's hands?
Yes.
Which is unfortunately a good place for us to stop because we are running out of
I
time.
know it.
Folks, today our guest has been Stephan Schwartz, and as Monica said earlier, you can look down under the YouTube description, and you're going to find the link to the Schwarz Report. And
Yeah, please check it out.
please check that out. As I have said earlier, I'm a regular reader. I receive it every day. And also his website, which is just stephanschwartz.com. And we are going to ask that he come back after I've had a chance
Stephan, please.
to read the 8 laws.
Oh, sure. I'll come back.
You
Because-
have dedicated so much of your life for the good of mankind, and I know Ken and I will just welcome you anytime you'd like to talk with us.
Sure. Well, you know, you give me a call. We'll set up another one.
Great.
My pleasure.
Thanks
Thank
so
you
much.
so much, Stephan.
All right, guys.
Bye-bye.
You take care. Bye-bye now.